Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. This is our Legends edition, and along with me is Vincent Turner, our host, our co-founder, and the breath of 100 Yards of Football. Jeremiah Long is our producer and engineer, and Vincent, today we get to talk about a guy who not only was a player, he was a coach, but in my opinion, one of the difference makers for Bill Battle is that he was an entrepreneur. And after he was done with coaching, he helped change the game from a business perspective in a way that very few others were able to do. So today we're going to look at Bill Battle.
Ultimate respect. I want to say thank you for holding it down last week while I was out, Mr. Harper LeBel, to our producer, Mr. Jeremiah Long. Bill Battle was one of my favorite coaches at the University of Tennessee. Even though things didn't end on a good note for him, but look at all the money he made outside the game. And boy, did he make some money. And I tell you, when I was 10 years old, there was two coaches I loved to death at that time in my lifetime. There was Gene Bartow, who had just accepted the job at Memphis State University, and Bill Battle. And simply because Bill Battle at that time was the youngest coach in all of college football history. He got the job at 28 years old. And all I can remember when he got the job, there was a guy who's one of my favorite entertainers, and we're going to get this show started today, Sly and the Family Stone. And they had a song out, Thank You, If You're Going to Be Mine. Looking at the devil, dum, 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 dum. Grinning at the gun, dum, 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 dum. Fingers start shaking, dum, 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 dum. I begin to run, dum, 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 dum. Bullets start chasing. And all I can remember, when Coach Battle got that job, I had that Slide in the Family Stone blasting. But just a tremendous individual who represented the university during his 6 years. And I'm glad today that we're doing a video on Mr. Bill Battle. Back to you, Hart.
Well, that was a thumping bass, if nothing else going on back in that
Yes, it was. Yes. And you know who was on the bass? Larry Graham.
Well, Larry did a great job, not only on that, but all the other hits that Sly and the Family Stone had. Some great albums back in those days. And we're going to talk about that just a second. Before we do, we're just going to mention that tonight is the Final Four. It is the final of the Final Four. And if you're interested in taking part in that and want to place a wager on it, we suggest that you go to mybookie.ag. It's so simple. You go online, you log in, you create an account, you fund the account, and then any of the bets that you want to place, you can do so quickly, easily, and from any time, any place in the world. mybookie.ag. If you use the promotional code MM50, there are extra chips and there are other bonuses that you get, features and benefits. We would greatly appreciate it if you use that code because that ties you and associates you with the 100 Yards of Football program. So hopefully you get to take advantage of that. You can bet on either of the games tonight. You've got the National Football League. You've got the National Hockey League. You've got NBA playoffs. There's Major League Baseball. You name it. The draft is coming up. So whatever it is that you would like to place a bet on, traditional conservative bets like slots or playing craps, or you could do something a little different with the horses, or just bet on sports. So mybookie.ag, we appreciate it if you go there, open an account, and use the promotional code MM50. Back to William Raines Battle III, born on December 8th, 1941. Now, I don't know much about his high school, Vincent, but I know that he played well enough to be looked at by one young coach at the University of Alabama named Paul Bear Bryant. He ends up going to Bama. He's a tight end there. You can't play your first year. By the way, during that recruiting year, 1959 is when he's on campus, and Alabama goes 7-2-2. They were 4-1-2 in the Southeast Conference. They end up going to the Liberty Bowl close to you. They lose to Penn State 7-0. But in 1960, they started turning things around. This is the fourth year that Alabama had Paul Bear Bryant as the head coach. And Bama's success begins in a very unique and different way. Bill Battle gets to be a part of that. Obviously, there were a lot of great players, but the first of many great successful years are just now getting ready to approach with Bill Battle on the field.
He was part of that 61 team, and it was Coach Bryant's first national championship. And when you look at that football team, what it really stuck out to me was that how they dominated. They scored 297 points that year, but they only gave up 27 points.
It's unbelievable.
The highest point total they gave up was to North Carolina State, 7 points, and the great Roman Gabriel was their quarterback. But I want you to listen to who's on that roster, Harp. Leroy Jordan, Billy Neighbors, Charlie Pale. They went on and coached at Clemson in Florida. Richard Williamson, they coached at the 901, who was all SEC at Memphis State University. Darwin Hall and Pat Trimble, who a lot of people say is probably the greatest football player at that time that played at Alabama, ended up being a doctor and died of cancer at the age of 27 in 1968. But that's when Alabama was rolling with that football team, and it started something very special in Tuscaloosa. That's why when you look at it today, that's why all the Alabama fans go crazy when they're not at the top. Roll Tide, Leonard Skinner. But I'm really impressed. You scored 290, what I just said, 297 points, and you only give up 27, and you have 5 shutouts. And that's a comment about that team that Coach Brian said about those players in Coach Battle, is that the first practice, I told them they played like sissies. But obviously, they took that to heart and took that personal. And you saw what happened in 1961. They went rolling. Back to you, Harp.
Man, it was an amazing defensive effort. I wrote down a couple of notes on that year. But let's first look at the 60 team. They were 8-1-2. They were 5-1-1 in the SEC. The next year in 61, as you mentioned, they're 11-0. They're 7-0, undefeated in the SEC play. They beat Arkansas in the Sugar Bowl, and that final was 10-3. They gave up 26 points is what I counted. Please forgive me if you have 27. They had 6 shutouts in a row. So in 7 games, they gave up a total of 3 points. It's just unbelievable. And they're playing against, some of the best teams in the country, at least back then. You mentioned Billy Neighbors and Pat Trammell. They were the captains that year. And it was that 4th year that Bear Bryant was head coach there at Alabama. Just an amazing year in the beginning of what ends up being many. In 62, they were 10-1. And they won the Orange Bowl. They beat Oklahoma 17-0. They ended up number 5 in the country with only 1 loss. Leroy Jordan, Jeremy Sharp there. Ole Miss ends up going 10-1, but they were ranked number 3, and they were the ones that win the SEC. They had just in terms of the difference that was made from a scheduling standpoint. So Ole Miss, and we've talked about how good they've been over the years. And one guy named Archie Manning who went there who made a difference. But in 63, we don't know much about what Bill Battle was doing. Bama was 9-2. They win the Sugar Bowl. They beat Ole Miss, and they end up number 7. So the success that the University of Alabama had while Bill Battle was there, I think like a sponge, he absorbed that with everything. Good player, 2nd team All-SEC as a tight end. You see him in the middle of the screen there at the top. He's a good size, good-looking football player on a great team, but he wasn't going to go into the pros. He sits out a year, Vincent, before he starts getting into the coaching. But I'm imagining that in those meetings at one point, there had to be a day where he goes, well, I don't know what I'm going to do the rest of my life, but I sure love football, and I want to be a part of it. And maybe he starts taking notes just a little bit differently and starting to absorb what other people are supposed to do, not just himself. That's one of the things. Bill died in 2024, just about 6 or 7 months ago. And that's one of the reasons we're paying homage to him now. But I'd love to have asked him, I said, when did you start realizing that your playing days were limited, but your coaching days were unlimited? Anyways, great career while he's at Alabama, nothing but success while he's there, or triumph after a loss and turning things around. Where else would you want to be if you were going to be learning from the best and being able to apply that to your life?
Well, one thing about it, as a football player, you brought up some good points, Harp, is that he had that field awareness, that toughness, and most of all that mortar when he was a football player. And as you said, he realized after his career that what I was going to do, and I was going to probably get into coaching. What sticks out of my mind he went to one of the toughest places that you can learn to be an assistant coach. He went to Army. And Army at that time had had success over the years. And then he came to Tennessee. And a lot of people don't know, I believe he was only 24 years old. He was the wide receivers coach. And he stayed there 3 years under a very good coach in Doug Dickey. But I just love him for just his journey, man. And when he became the head coach of Tennessee, I give it back to you, Harp. Then I come in on that. But I just like everything about him. Back to you, Harp.
Well, you mentioned the Army assistant coaching job. That was in 1964 and 65. So he's at the academy for 2 years there. And then he ends up going to Tennessee in 1966. And as you mentioned, Doug Dickey was the head coach there. Well, Doug, after 3 years, ends up leaving and going to Florida. And so that opens up the job. They kind of liked the guy. They said, let's give this kid a chance. And from 1970 to 73, he developed a team there. Now, granted, Doug Dickey had a class or two under his belt, but they were 39 and 9 during the first 4 years from 1970, 71, 72, and 73. So he turns the tide very quickly and roll tide. I didn't mean to do that. He led the Volunteers. They were 11 and 1 in 1970, 10 and 2 in 71, 10 and 2 again in 1972, and 8 and 4 in 73. Goodness gracious, Vincent. With LSU, with Ole Miss, and some school named Alabama, this guy made some hay and got to work real early, didn't he? I mean, a very impressionable start there in Neyland Stadium for Battle.
Think about the pressure of you taking a job at 28 years old in a college football segment, and you got Bear Bryant in the conference as a head coach. You got Suge Jordan in the conference as a head coach, and you got Charlie McClinton in the conference as a head coach. Remember what I'm saying, at 28 years old. And I think about this first team, the 1970 team, because Doug Dickey and them had just came off a year when they was ranked number 1 or 2, well, number 2 in the country, and they lost a game to Ole Miss to Archie Manning, and that ruined their national championship chances. But think about the 70 team. He played a very good Air Force team in the Sugar Bowl that was coached by Mr. Ben Martin, had a quarterback by the name of Bob Parker. Then he comes back in 71. Tennessee has an excellent year. They go in the game ranked, I believe, 6 or 7 in the bowl game, the Liberty Bowl, against a very good Arkansas team. They had a quarterback by the name of Joe Ferguson and a coach from Decatur, Georgia by the name of Frank Broyles. Then they play LSU in his third year in the Bluebonnet Bowl down there in Houston, Texas, a real good, tough football game, 24-17, because I remember it because I watched it on TVS. Burt Jones was the quarterback at that time. We know how his career ended when he went to the National Football League. But during that time, what really, really was impressive, he was still a young man, only in his early 30s, 30, 31 years old, and he was having success, following in a big-time program, keeping it at a high level. And then, of course, what I'm really, really respectable about Coach Battle, he started the first African-American quarterback in the Southeastern Conference history in Condridge Holloway. And they had a phenomenal relationship, because I used to get up, tell you a true story. I used to get up every morning. Mama and cook them biscuits, them pancakes rocking, the sausage rocking. And I get up with my father and watch the Bill Battle show. And I noticed how he really cared about his players. Lester McLean, Kurt Watson, Ray Nettles, Art Reynolds, Mickey Marvin, Stanley Morgan, and the legend, the crazy head coach Tommy West. This guy really loved his players, and at that time, Tennessee was rolling. But he was still a young man, and he was handling his business. Back to you, Harp.
Yeah, there's a connectivity that you have with a younger coach that maybe he gets me a little bit better. He won't be as hard that I didn't go to class, or maybe not that, but you know what I'm saying. There's a youth that the young appreciate, as opposed to an old guy with a cigar in his mouth or a cigarette. And that was a lot of the way the coaching went on back in those days, but it's very different. Condridge Holloway, you mentioned him. He was going to go to Alabama. Bear Bryant recruited him and wanted him, but said, "Hey, son, we think you're going to play wide receiver for us." "No, sir, I want to play quarterback." "Well, on Alabama's roster, you're going to play, and you're going to be a star. You're going to play wide receiver." And it turns out he ends up going to Tennessee. So I think in the battle that exists between coaches and recruiting and who's going to get what kid and how you're going to play him, that was certainly a win and a big one for Bill Battle. And Conridge went on to be outstanding and memorable, legendary Tennessee Volunteer. Had a great career in college, and we'll probably talk about him one day down the line. But Bill Battle helped make that happen, and I'd chalk it up as a loss for Bear Bryant and not being able to get him. And in that coaching tree that Bear has, with all these guys that you mentioned earlier that become assistant or head coaches, Bill Battle had a couple of victories against Alabama, and one of them was that recruiting one. But things started turning for the worse there a little bit. Last couple of years while he was there, 500, 6-5, a couple of ties that really start setting the faithful at Volunteer Land and the folks in Knoxville to start looking in another direction. And that happens pretty much in 1976 when Johnny Majors comes back. They fire Battle. Majors comes back. He had won the national championship at Pitt, so obviously he was a guy that they wanted. They were looking for him to be a favorite son there. And now Bill Battle is looking for work.
The one aspect that I really respected about Coach Battle, his last 2 years were very tough. And it got to a point that people were putting signs in his yard. Fire Bill Battle. I think it was an incident. His house got egged. I'm not for sure, but I think I heard rumors behind that. But it was very tough. And again, I want to say he was still a young man. But I like how he took it. And he handled it real well. And unfortunately, it was a time, as you just mentioned, Johnny Majors had just won the national championship at Pitt. He's a guy that played football at Tennessee. There was rumors, Johnny, please come home. And he came home. But I would tell you this, during them last 2 years, my respect is always going to be highly for Coach Battle. Rest his soul in peace. Because what he took, and remember, I was growing up in Memphis, Tennessee, and Memphis, Tennessee has the largest alumni base in that city. And the media was killing Coach Battle. One more time, man, they was putting signs in his yard. You need to go. And what I heard, rumors, they egged his house. But he took it as a man. He left. And I'm very surprised he never got back into coaching. Back to you, Hart.
Yeah, 75, they were 7-5. They were 3-3 in the conference, and that's just unacceptable at Tennessee. And then 76, the record for the team was 6-5 overall, but they were 2-4 in the SEC. So the signs were not only on the wall, but obviously on the side of his house as well. And he ends up getting relieved of his duties. He's out of coaching for a couple years, Vincent, until he gets involved with Golden Eagle Enterprises, and they're located in Selma, Alabama. And in 1981, he starts working for them. And the small little idea of, let's talk a little bit about licensing. Guys, if you look at the picture in the middle where Bill Battle is wearing number 84, at the bottom of that, there's a little red and white logo. We've kind of made it a little bit bigger just to the left of that. And it says Alabama Crimson Tide. That Old English A, which is a trademark of Alabama. I have a friend that worked there in the athletic department. This is about 15 years ago. That A alone, 15 years ago, brings in over $1 million in revenue for the university. Just the licensing. So people that want to put that on a T-shirt or on a hat or on a golf shirt, you have to pay for it. Now, you don't have to pay a lot, but you have to pay for it in order to use someone else's logo and their likeness. So the name, image, and likeness really began back in that era with the school, with the colors, with the logo. And so Bill starts working for a company, and guess who he visits out of the box and says, let's see if we can't do something, Coach Bryant, to increase your revenue at the University of Alabama. And Bear signs a licensing agreement with them. He's the first contact that Bill Battle has an association with. and money starts flowing in. You mentioned he's a very rich man by the time he passes away, but he helped Alabama and several other schools. Don't think it was just Alabama, guys. He helped them market. Memphis, for example, that Tiger, that M, the way that it's situated, there's a way that the school can make some additional money through selling t-shirts, hats, or even golf shirts, whatever it is. Put it on towels, put it on blankets, and you sell more because it's got that logo on it than you would normally. But the business aspect of it, if you have my logo on it and you start selling some, let's make a deal where we both make some money together. And that's where the entrepreneurial part fits in, Vincent. And what an original concept and idea. And him being a former coach and being able to approach all these other coaches, especially at the collegiate level, and start getting them to sign on the dotted line where everybody makes a little bit more money. He was, again, an innovator in making that happen early on in that portion of the business of college football.
Over 200 schools became part of his dream. I think about Coach Battle, and I go back again to the players again, Bobby Majors, Jackie Walker, Larry Severs, and of course the great Phil Fulmer, who had some kind words to say about Coach Battle when he passed. But I want everyone to hear this. Here's a guy that never got back into coaching. Here's a young man who at 20 years old took on one of the toughest jobs in the country as a young man in 1970 and never got back into coaching. But he created a company, the Collegiate License Company. I want you to hear these numbers. And this is why God doesn't make no mistake. When you're a good person, He's going to take care of you. Mr. Battle's company, I think right now, is worth $4 billion. $4 billion. They don't even post his net worth on what he is on Wikipedia or even on social media. But there's rumors that he's made over $800 million in royalties. He's one of the richest guys in the world. Coach Bill Battle, a guy that I never seen it coming, but a guy that's going to be to my heart, very successful, and took an idea and took it to another level. And got over 200 schools to become part of his dream. I don't know what it is right now, but I know his son Pat runs the show. Man, Bill Battle, man. One of my favorite people, one of my favorite coaches, man, at the University of Tennessee. And it taught me about if you have a dream, certain situations are not going to work out. But I remember Coach Battle said this on one of his shows when I used to get up at 12 years old and watch him. He said, when you have a situation, if you don't never quit, no matter what you go through, you're going to be very successful. Now, I'll be turning 65 in July, and I realized this. That's one of the most strongest statements that you can say in life, because Coach Battle got fired at the University of Tennessee in 76. And all I know is he went quietly and he became one of the richest guys on this, what you want to say, on this level, and took a little bit of idea and took it to another level. Thank you, Coach Battle. Back to you, Harp.
Yeah, I think there was a little bit of humble pie there, but that really made him approachable in terms of what he was going to do later on. You know, he starts working, as I mentioned, for Golden Eagle, and then he starts up the Collegiate Licensing Company, as you mentioned, because I think deep down he goes, I can do this. I can go visit with coaches. I do it all the time. I can talk X's and O's with them, and then I can say, hey, coach, how you running your business? What? What are you talking about? I just coach the players. No, coach. Everyone's always worried about their budget. How would you like to be able to not have to worry about that anymore and have additional revenue coming in each and every year just by selling T-shirts that have your school logo on them, the team colors? I don't know how to do that. Well, let me show you. That's a great idea, Bill. I'd love to do that. Well, here's my contract. Here's what we'll do for you. So in 1983, the company moves from Selma to Atlanta, and then it grows in leaps and bounds. In 2013, he's approached by the higher ups at the University of Alabama and says, we'd like you to help run our business. And so he becomes the athletic director for 5 years, from 2013 to 2017. He replaced a gentleman named Mal Moore, who was the athletic director there, who retired due to health reasons. And there's a guy named Nick Saban, who was at the University of Alabama at that time. And Nick ended up making over $10 million a year. He was the highest paid coach in the country and the highest paid employee in the state of Alabama. You work for the university, you are a state employee. And people would justify, how do you do that? How do you pay a man that much? Well, when Alabama wins the national championship, it probably brings in over $100 million in new revenue through the licensing, through the NCAA, and being able to play in the BCS championship or playing for the NCAA championship. You get into the Final Four, there's going to be some money at the other end of that. And so student tuition was lower because all this additional money came in. Student admissions were higher. There are new buildings. If you ever go by the campus there in Tuscaloosa, there are cranes all over the place, making a 2-story building into a 10-story building. The research center and everything that's a part of that, it comes from additional money, selling T-shirts. So there's so many different ways that Bill Battle was able to take advantage of a bad situation where he gets fired and he doesn't know what he's going to do with the rest of his life. And for a couple of years, he probably had to kind of think this thing through. And what's the best thing that could happen for me, and how can I help the other coaches that are in the world? And Vincent, he certainly did an amazing job. He passes away, as I mentioned earlier, just a few months ago, on November 28th of 2024. I don't know much about the details of that, but you mentioned that this man is at least 500, maybe close to $1 billion in net worth, and his son is running the business now. And congratulations to him and everything that he was able to do. He had a 59-22-2 record while he was at Tennessee. Who could complain about that other than some angry Volunteer fans that were upset the last couple of years? But he goes to 4 bowl games. I'm sorry, 5. He wins 4. He goes 4-1. The only loss was in the Gator Bowl back in 1973. But great success to him, and certainly as an entrepreneur, an original guy in an original time, and boy, was he able to take advantage of it.
Coach Battle, thank you for being the head coach at the University of Tennessee during my years when I was 10 to 16 years old. I loved your show every morning, man. And as you see, he became very, very successful. So to Coach Battle and your family, thank you, because you did make the University of Tennessee proud at that time. And you coached some great players, man. Phil Fulmer went on and had a great career. Condrich Holloway is doing some great things at the University of Tennessee as an ambassador. Stanley Morgan played an outstanding receiver with the New England Patriots and made it to the Super Bowl. Larry Severs was an All-American. Thank you, Coach Battle. And my tribute to you this morning is that from the great band Sly and the Family Stone. This for you, Mr. Travers, because Sly moved from Denton, Texas, out there where you at in San Francisco. I know a lot of Tennessee fans were very upset at Coach Battle and got him out of there and got him fired. But you know what? Dance to the music. Do, 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 do. He danced to what? $4 billion in his company and over $800 million in royalties. I think you need to say, Coach Battle, we need to bow down to you. You are Moses and Jesus. Back to you, Paul.
Well, Moses, Jesus, and then Sly and the Family Stone will all tip their hat and say, hey, well done. You made the game better after you were done than when you took over. So William Raines Battle III, who was born on December 8th, 1941, he passed away on November 28th, 2024. We salute you and we thank you for all that you did for college football. He was an NCAA champion, and he was a guy that helped other organizations, schools, and football programs become a little bit better because of his influence. So we want to say thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you being a part of 100 Yards of Football. For Vincent Turner, co-host and founder, for Jeremiah Long, our producer and engineer, we want to say thank you, everybody. Have a fantastic rest of your day.